Go. Hi. So today we're being joined by a former client and a Stanford grad, Ty Greenberg. Ty has a very unique background that I think will be interesting to our listeners. And he's also a reapplicant, a successful reapplicant who did something that I know many of our listeners try to do, which is if denied at first to the schools of their choice, persist and get in. So we're going to start by first of all, Ty, welcome to the podcast.
Thanks, Alex. Good to be here. It's good to see you again.
And yes, good to be
Excited to
with
be
you.
here.
I think so. The first thing I want to ask you is if you can describe your background and kind of what you did before you decided to apply to MBA.
Yeah. So I had a little bit of a non-traditional background, as you were saying, to apply to like business school. So I applied back in 2021. In terms of my career, I was a graduate from Georgetown with the School of Foreign Service. I actually started my career at a law firm, a litigation firm based out of New York. I started my career as an analyst. I did 2 years as an analyst. It was a really weird role. So for this particular firm, they didn't have paralegals, they didn't have associates. So you were sort of framed as like the master of the facts. So kind of an untraditional start to my career. And then I ended up staying another 2 years doing a bunch of like business and operations and building programs within this law firm. So I think when I was applying, back then, I was trying to figure out sort of how I could kind of, stand out to the admissions committee. I wasn't sure if I wanted to apply to business schools. I was applying also to law schools. So I was just trying to sort out really where how I could stand out and what were the best paths for me. And so, yeah, I think, for me, the, transition to business school was kind of like a gradual process. But I always knew I wanted to go to Stanford, and that was kind of my dream at the time. So, I just really wanted to make that happen.
So can you tell us which schools did you apply to eventually and what happened?
Yeah, so I had this dream to go to Stanford, but I applied to a mix of business schools and actually law schools in the first cycle. So yeah, I knew that I had this kind of career in the legal profession, and so I kind of knew what a career path, and I had some specific goals that I would want to pursue if I went to law school. On the business school path, I had kind of found out through really the work that I did at this law firm that I actually loved entrepreneurship. I love building programs, and so I applied to a mix of all sort of like top business schools, Harvard, Stanford, Wharton, MIT, pretty much all the M7 schools. So I wasn't too selective, to be transparent, at the time. I was just thinking that business school would be a way for me to kind of pivot and elevate my career. And I thought it'd be a great place to get a new network. I was interested in pursuing stuff in the legal tech side, doing some stuff on fintech, and so that was really back in 2021, kind of what I was thinking, and those were types of profiles of schools that I was looking at.
What was your story in terms of your vision? What did you tell them you wanted to do, short term, long term? How did you frame that?
Yeah, I mean, it was a gradual process, and I think this is something where, Alex, you were really helpful. It's kind of drawing out that narrative. So I think, um, you know, one of the things I really wanted to do was have impact. I wanted to build like a new program. I knew that I was entrepreneurial. I knew I loved startups, and so I was trying to find something kind of intersection of that. And I thought Stanford in particular, but a lot of business schools would have served as a platform to kind of pivot into that ecosystem. I thought that the sort of opportunity set versus legal services was much broader, and so I was trying to find sort of that unity in that path. I think for me, it was a gradual transition through my career. I never thought I'd end up at Georgetown for undergrad. I never really thought I'd end up at a law firm. So there were all these different sort of random inflection points where, for one reason or another, I opted into a different sort of like trajectory. So when I was at Georgetown, I just really wanted to actually be a foreign service officer. That's why I came to the School of Foreign Service. And then when I was graduating, actually, there was a hiring freeze with Trump. So foreign service was just totally out of sort of the realm of possibilities. So I ended up working at this law firm because they basically were like, oh, hey, you can just do like a lot of international client work and travel, and you can get that international exposure. So I actually had not that much interest in legal services. I just kind of was interested in doing something international, working with people from other countries and learning more about the US legal system as well. And then, that totally was very different, but it kind of pulled me along that trajectory. And then I found out I was an entrepreneur. So you kind of like get pulled along these things. And I think it's hard to find coherency sometimes. But I think what you and I worked on in terms of, you know, how do you pull out that thread across those different inflection points, and then how do you present that sort of, in a coherent way for an admissions committee, and then how do you also explain what you want to do next when, as a practical matter, you might not know, you just have a sense of like different interests and contexts where you've excelled. So I think that was kind of the process, and I don't know if it's a universal process for everyone, but that's kind of the work that you have to do.
So you applied all these schools and the
Yeah.
results. Tell us about the results.
Yeah, so I was actually waitlisted at Stanford, which I was super excited about, but it kind of put me in an interesting position because I was like, okay, I'm on the waiting list for the school of my dreams, first round, but I didn't know if I got in, and then literally everywhere else I was either rejected or waitlisted. So I always joked with my friends that I was like the LeBron James of waitlist. So I kind of had this like crippling anxiety for almost a year where I wasn't sure if I could get into Stanford. I wasn't sure if I was going to leave. I was living in DC at that time. So I was like, I don't know if I'm going to move to the West Coast. I might get in, I might not. I just really didn't know exactly what I was doing. Even people I worked with at the firm at the time, they're like, "Are you going to business school?" And I was like, "Potentially, I don't know. I'm trying to figure it out." So I'm on the wait list. So I think that's encouraging. But yeah, it was a mix of results, and then ultimately, I didn't get off the wait list. I wasn't successful really getting in anywhere, and so it was the weirdest experience because I was like, oh, I think I'm competitive. I think I've put together a really great application working with you and working with, Stacey Blackman. But yeah, ultimately didn't have that result. So it was like, do I reapply? Do I do something different? And so yeah, happy to talk through what I did and why I reapplied. But that was kind of the result in the first initial like foray.
You stayed on the Stanford waitlist till the very end, right? All the
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
and
And I
what that was like with updates and all of that.
Yeah, so I did. We worked on this a lot, but I submitted updates every cycle. I continued to progress things in my career. I got promoted. I had other opportunities that I was pursuing. Um, I kind of wrote a ton of letters actually to the admissions committee. I don't know if they ever formally read it, but I was like, hey, I've learned all these legal advocacy skills, in the context of working at this law firm. Like, why don't I apply to try to sort of get me off the wait list? And so every opportunity that I had, by the way, I don't know if they ever read those. I would just get an email like, we've looked at it, and we're adding it to your file. But I think I kind of transitioned my mindset to like, okay, this is an ongoing relationship with this particular business school, but also just generally through my application process. This is a conversation, and so I'm just going to keep them posted on every progress point, and I'm going to continue to make meaningful like steps in my career and in what I was doing in my professional life. So that's kind of my approach. I don't recommend it for everybody, but that's what I did tactically.
You built a relationship with them, and ultimately it didn't work out.
Yeah,
You did something that very few people get to do. You got an interview with GSB, almost
yeah.
got in. Very disappointing. You didn't despair when it didn't work out. Tell us what you did next in that year, before you eventually reapplied.
Yeah. Well, so it was a mix of things. So as I said, I wasn't sure if I'd ever get into business school. And I was like not getting in anywhere, not just Stanford. I was just like not able to find any traction. I learned about this in business school, but there's like product market fit. I had no product market fit. So I was just like kind of stalled. I just figured it was a weird year. I mean, this was 2021, so it was like middle of the pandemic. There was actually an influx of applications to business schools. And there was a bunch of people that decided to delay going because they didn't want to do a different type of business school experience. So I figured it was just statistically a little bit of an unusual year, and I was competitive. I had confidence in my skill set and the profile that I put together and worked with you on. So an admissions package. So I ended up taking a new job, which was something that I had talked about in my app. I wanted to go to the West Coast. So I moved out to the West Coast. I took a new job as a director at a litigation finance fund, which was a startup, but was super fun. I had told, the admissions committee I was interested in the startup ecosystem, so I sort of credibly leaned into that. I retook the test, so I thought a weakness was actually my test scores, so I retook it and bumped up my score just a little bit, which I thought was helpful. I ended up actually changing the set of folks that wrote on my behalf. So I found other people that I think were more close to what I was doing at that time, and I just reapplied. And I actually stopped applying to law schools. I was like, this is not really what I want, and I just applied to the three business schools that I thought would be really exciting, and I had made a ton of progress in my career. So
Those are key
yeah,
points. Basically, you addressed what we analyze in terms of the weaknesses. That
yeah,
addressed the entrepreneurship. Well, you have no experience in entrepreneurship. You made the big leap.
yeah,
Nice bump in title. You went to a director level, and you
yeah.
moved to the West Coast. So I think the key lesson here for the reapplicants is make changes. Don't expect sort of to achieve different results with the same story. You really went out there, analyzed what the weak points were, and you made some drastic, significant.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think through that process of being on the wait list, I like had an opportunity to really reflect. So when I applied, I also, I changed my story slightly, I refined it. You are the same core person. So, there was sort of a sharpening process where I was here's the things that really matter to me. Here's what I'm working on. Here are the steps that I've taken that get me closer to that objective. And here's how business school like fits into that. But this is me and this is who I am. And I really got super crystal clear on that. And so I think actually it was one of the best things in retrospect that ever happened to me, because it really forced me to get like super disciplined in terms of, to your point, what are your weaknesses? How can I tactically improve those? What are my strengths? How do I draw those out and emphasize them as much as possible? I mean, you do this I'm an entrepreneur now, I run a startup, like you do this process over and over again in a business context. You're like, what are my weaknesses? Work on my weaknesses. What are my strengths? Accentuate my strengths. How do I sell this effectively? What's my narrative? How do I communicate? How do I tell that story? So that was a great process actually, and I think it's a funny thing. The first thing you do before you get to business school is you have to sell yourself to an admissions committee, and I think it's actually a good skill and process to run through, both personally but also professionally, just to kind of have to think through that. So,
We stayed
and you were
engaged.
a great advisor in that. Yeah, yeah.
Uh, and I was saying that you stayed engaged with the committee throughout. You build a relationship. You made some drastic changes. So tell us how long before you reapplied again? How much time passed in between? And which schools did you reapply to?
Yeah, so I only applied to MIT, Harvard, and Stanford. A full year had passed, but because I had been on the wait list and I applied round one, it was like every quarter I was submitting stuff. So I think actually I heard back in August or like late into the summer that I wasn't in, and I basically resubmitted like a week later. But I knew that I like was interested in reapplying, and I had made a ton of steps in my career. So I at that point I kind of felt like, look, if I get in, that's great. I definitely want to pursue this. But if not, I felt pretty confident in my trajectory, and I had made a lot of the changes that I had been talking about in my application. So I think that that's something that's also kind of funny about business school, is that it kind of comes to you sometimes when you're you least expect it, or you're sort of actually maybe thinking, oh, I'm not sure if I need this, and then if you feel like, oh, this is actually the experience that I could use, and for these reasons, for that reasons, you can definitely go and do it. So it's definitely a unique experience these days. So
You reapply to those three schools. Tell us about the results.
sorry.
So tell us about the results.
Yeah, yeah. So actually, I get into all three, which was great, and super exciting and very validating. And then yeah, I decided I still wanted to go to Stanford. That was my dream, and so I just went there. But I think yeah, it was a total reversal of the experience. But end to end, the whole process, probably from deciding that I wanted to go to business school, starting to work with Stacy Blackman, and then actually getting in, was like a 2.5 year journey. So definitely not for the faint of hearted, but I was persistent and gritty, and I think I executed on what I was trying to do.
I have to say, this is one of the most amazing stories I dealt with to go from all rejections to getting in
Yeah,
top three schools in the country. I mean, it's extremely rare to get into both Stanford and Harvard. I can tell you, I have a
yeah,
lot of clients who get into one, but not the other.
yeah.
You did something that's extremely rare. So it was really, really incredible. Um, Tell us
Turnaround. Yeah,
more.
yeah,
I
yeah.
mean, it was really amazing. Tell us more about the work of Stacy Blackman. Maybe your reflections on what was good, what was helpful ultimately, and sort of how you felt about that process.
Well, I mean, look, it was a long relationship and it was a process. So you and I worked together pretty intensively. We had a lot of late nights. I think, um, you know, one of the things that I thought, working with Stacy Blackman and working with you, that was really helpful was building up that foundation of kind of and that process to think through your career and all these different inflection points. And I think almost psychologically getting myself in a place where I was like, okay, I have this, non-traditional profile, but what are the things that make me exceptional? How can I draw those out? Where's the coherency across all these experiences? So I think where you guys were really great advisors was helping me build that muscle up and like develop that narrative. And I think finding that story is really useful, and a good exercise to run through at any stage of your career, whether you're post business school. I still use that same skill set. I think another piece is the flight test. So you get the benefit of like having sort of someone really kick the tires on your application and figure out what are those strengths and what are those weaknesses, and then you can kind of simulate in real time like what maybe how the admissions office or the admissions committee would think about you as an applicant. And that's another thing that's a really valuable thing in any context. So when I raise VC money now, like I'll go to friends that are VCs and I'll give them my pitch, and then they'll say, okay, here's the strengths of your company, here's the weaknesses, here's what we like, what we don't like. So I think being super accepting the feedback, it's a good skill.
And
Starting to lean
just
on other
no,
people. Yeah.
just to interrupt for 1 second, for the listeners who are not familiar with the concept of flight test, it's basically Stacy Blackman, a former outcomes from all the top schools, who will review your application right before submission with all the elements completed and do it in a way that's an actual outcome would review and provide feedback on various aspects for consistency, quality, any other feedback, and that's kind of the gist of the flight test. So, yeah, go.
100%. Yeah. And then I think just working with you and getting to understand a little bit more about sort of like across different sort of classes of folks that apply to business school, what are some common things that help you pop as an applicant? What are some things that are potential weaknesses? How do admission, like just understanding how do admissions committees think about applicants? How should you think about uh, you know, your story and your narrative? I think going to business school is a very unique and privileged opportunity, but the admissions process is long and it's a process. And so I think having someone who's really good with that and understands and has seen it across multiple cycles, very valuable. So that I think that was one of the best. I mean, it was a partnership. We collaborated.
Oh, that's great. Thank you for that, Ty. So amazing story, 2.5 year journey from
Yeah,
complete rejection across like 7 schools to changing things drastically to getting into the very best schools that everyone dreams about. Amazing story. Imparting any sort of closing thoughts now that you've graduated, you've gone through the whole process, you're a Stanford grad. Any thoughts for the listeners out there who are thinking about business schools and their careers and so on?
yeah. I mean, I think look like I think my story is one where like hustle and grit were really important for me. Um, so I think if you're someone who's on the wait list, I would say don't despair. Like you have a competitive profile. Have confidence in that and go forward. And a lot of people in your career and in life will tell you no. And I think in some instances it's good to hear that no and do something else. But in other instances, if you think you're onto something and you feel like you have a competitive edge or you feel like you have a right to win, I would just go after it, and I would be confident in that. I would work with smart people like Alex. You're amazing to work with, and Stacey Plattman was super amazing. But like find those people around you that can support you and elevate you in that journey. But don't definitely don't give up. So that'd be my kind of narrative. And I would be smart about it. You know, I would figure out, as we talked about, your strengths and your weaknesses, make real improvements, make changes, use the data that's coming at you from the world, like strategically. Like don't like just ignore that stuff. If someone's saying, hey, this is something you can improve, gravitate towards that, but definitely stay true to yourself and be authentic. And, you know, maybe it's a lot of platitudes, but I think hang in there. And there's other people that have, you know, have experiences where they fail and then they're able to kind of come back from it. So I think that's my core narrative. So, you know, that's what I would recommend to folks.
Okay. Thank you very much. It was a pleasure seeing you again, and thank you for sharing. This was incredibly valuable. And
Yeah.
hope to speak to you soon.
Yeah, it's good to see you, Alex.